Good afternoon, everybody. We're ready to get started here. Thank you for coming, for those of you that are here in person. And for those of you that are online, thank you for logging in. My name's Mark Barnico, and I'm the Executive Director of the University of Chicago Francis and Rose Yuen campus here in Hong Kong. I see a lot of familiar faces. Thank you for coming today. And welcome to the program. Really appreciate not only that you were able to attend, but also our special guest was able to join us today. For those of you that don't know about this campus and you're here for the first time, this is one of three locations in Asia. This is our main flagship campus, but we also have a center in Beijing, and we also have a center in Delhi, and we are expanding around the world. This campus really helps us enable our rich traditions of ambitious research and world-class education, and most importantly, deep collaboration, not only in Hong Kong, but also around the region and around the world. The University of Chicago Francis and Rose Yuen campus here is home to the Chicago Booth Executive MBA program. We're also home to our executive education offering, both Booth and the university's professional education offering. Our college study abroad, we have our students come here with their faculty members. We also host the Polsky Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, as well as the Rustandi Center for Social Sector Innovation. And we have many of our staff members here. If you have questions about the programs that we offer, feel free to pull one of our staff members aside and they can get you pointed in the right direction. The Trailblazer Forum is a unique forum that we developed, and it's dedicated to leadership. And it connects the University of Chicago Yuen campus here in Hong Kong with the broader community throughout Asia. We bring senior thought leaders to our campus so they can share their experience, their vision, and their strategy. So today, I'd like to welcome the Honorable Bernard Charnwut Chan as our Trailblazer Forum speaker for today. And I'll share a short summary, although you probably, if you can read the screen, we have a lot of his accomplishments, accolades, the organizations that he's been involved with, so you can see them there. But just briefly, he is the chairman of and president of the Asia Financial Holdings Limited and chairman of Asia Insurance Company Limited. He's executive vice chairman of Our Hong Kong Foundation and chairman of M+ Museum. We're going to talk a lot about art today. He's also the chairman of the Hong Kong Thailand Business Council and director of the Bumrungrad, I hope I got that right, hospital public company in Thailand. And he's also an advisor to Bangkok Bank China Company Limited. Bernard previously served as the Hong Kong deputy to the National People's Congress of the People's Republic of China, and he's been the convener of the non-official members of the Executive Council. Bernard's also been a member of the Legislative Council, chairman of the Hong Kong Palace Museum, chairman of the Council of Lingnan University, the Council of Sustainable Development, and he has a passion for heritage, so he's been very actively involved with the Antiquities Advisory Board. We even had a really brief walk around our grade 3 heritage site, which I encourage you all to do. And he's also been a recipient of the Gold Bauhinia Star in 2006 and the Grand Bauhinia Medal in 2020. So that's it for the introduction. We'll get a lot more into his background. Please welcome me, Bernard Chan, to come up to the podium. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Mark.
I have several areas of questions that I'd like to get into with you, but I'd first really like to start out. We have an audience of people who may not know you. They may not be from Hong Kong, live in Hong Kong. They may be from around Asia, or even people from Chicago and the United States. So if you wouldn't mind just sort of giving us a little bit of an introduction of your background and your journey and how you came to be where you are today.
And how much time I have?
Take as much time as you need.
Okay. It's not easy because I do have a very difficult and interesting journey all this year. But anyway, just to say, I'm born and raised in Hong Kong, so I'm definitely a local Hong Kong. But my family, my extended family, are predominantly based in Thailand. Now, they're all Chinese, but like many overseas Chinese, my grandfather have left China in his time because everyone at the time, is in need of a new journey, a new life. So he went to Thailand. So my father was the oldest in his generation, and he was the only one that was actually born in China. The rest of his siblings were born in Bangkok. So we are the only branch of the family still based here. Everyone else is in Bangkok base. So I have a strong connection between, of course, Hong Kong and Thailand and ASEAN. My wife is from Singapore, so and I have many relatives throughout ASEAN. So I have this, I guess, being a local Hong Kong Chinese, but yet, but very ASEAN. So that's the family background. Of course, I graduated with a studio art degree in college, liberal arts and studio art, but yet I'm a politician. I was a politician. I don't know if I'm still a politician or not. I think most people in Hong Kong think I'm a politician. In fact, when I left the executive council last year, a few of my personal friends, and this is quite embarrassing. They are my personal friends, and they call me up and say, "Oh, now you can finally go back to work for your family in business." I said, "What do you mean? I've been working in the family for all this time. Who do you think are paying me? It's not politics paying me." But I think that's how people see me in Hong Kong. But yes, I'm also in business, largely in financial services. And of course, now my most newfound passion is arts and culture. So I guess I have very multiple, passions in different things. And I think it all comes down to one thing, though. It's about how do we improve the quality of life in Hong Kong, right? Whether you talk about I was in charge of sustainability before, and heritage. By the way, so before you arrived, I came earlier, and Mark took me around because I was somewhat involved in this as well in the early years. But I didn't actually get to see the building until today. It's really amazing. And I'm so glad the University of Chicago revitalized this site. It's not just a classroom, but you preserve the original heritage, and also there's a fantastic interpretation room just downstairs. So if you're tired of listening to me, please just move downstairs, and there's a much better place for you for take-home value this afternoon.
Thank you. Along the lines, one of my key questions for you on your personal background is I heard or read somewhere that you said that art helped you in politics, and I'm really curious what you meant by that.
I'm an accidental artist because it was never meant to be. It was only because I was so sick in college. I went through 3 bypass operations my first 3 years in college. So I spent pretty much every other semester off campus recuperating from my surgeries. And of course, at the time, you don't have Zoom classes, anything remote. So the only class or the only course that I can find that I'm interested and yet allow me to do off campus is a subject on art department called independent study, which basically allowed me to do anything I want. I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. And I did it for 3 years. And then I began to actually like art. I didn't start off liking art. It was really just, I thought at the time was a way for me to get credit so I can graduate from college. So by my 4th year returning to campus, for the first time, I can actually finish the whole year on campus. By then I have as many art credit as I have my econ credit. I start off as an econ major. So, well, thank goodness, because I was so sick all this time. And so my parents basically say, well, you can choose, right? Because can you imagine, this is talking about 30, 40 years ago, no parents would want their child to study something that they consider totally, I shouldn't use the word useless, I'll be offending people here. But at the time, Chinese parents are very practical. What are you going to do with your art degree? right? But because I was so sick, so my parents say, hey, do whatever you want. And so I got to choose. And I make the right decision, right, to at the time, to choose art. But, Mark, never ever once did I think that ever I'm going to use that degree for, right? I knew that I'm going to come back to join, finance and business, because my father's a banker, my uncle's a banker, my grandfather's a banker, my brother's a banker. So my entire life, I thought I'm going to be a banker, right? But I'm not a banker today, so thank goodness. Did I offend the banker? Sorry, Albert. Albert, I offended you already. I'm sorry. There's a banker in the room.
Bankers so far.
That's so difficult to be a politician. You always end up offending someone in the room. Someone, these days. But anyway, the point is, you know what? The art that is obviously I'm not a good artist. I'm a pseudo artist. You can go to my website, check out my work, but I don't consider my artist. But it's not whether you're an artist or not. It's the training that I received, right? Because at the time in college, I don't have the time here to go through all the detail, but basically the one thing I learned about from my practice of art was the fact that I have to think out the box. Reason to that was in my final year, my 5th year, as a studio art artist, our final work is our work to be displayed, right, in the galleries. There were 6 other graduating art students, 6 others, but all 6 of them has already spent 4 years in coming up with their specialties. So they already either have the talent or they have been trained up. I basically was parachuted to the department. And so the number one challenge I found at the time was, well, how I'm going to be, because your work would be paired up with everybody else. So the number one challenge I had to deal with is to not to be compared with. So I was desperately looking for my own style, right? Because the other 6 students, each of them already pick a style. So one is in painting, one's in drawing, one's in ceramic, one's in sculpture, one's in photography, and one's in mixed media. Mixed media, I guess today will be considered, I don't know, computer art or something. So what is mine? So it forces me to think out the box and be creative. I think that was a training that I received that I continue to use today, whether it's in my business or it's in politics. I mean, I continuously have to apply that training to allow me to always think beyond what's the norm, right? And it works every single time. So I'm forever grateful to the training I received from my studio art days.
That's a great answer, and I was really curious how you might answer that question, but perfect. Thank you very much for that. University of Chicago is very well known for a specific value, and that is, and this is a foundational question, right? We'll go into other areas in terms of your background in the arts, but foundationally, we value freedom of expression at U Chicago, and one of the things that I did during COVID was I got deeply interested in studying the abstract expressionist movement of the late 40s and 50s and beyond. And it just kind of struck me that it would be interesting to ask you whether you feel that the Hong Kong art community, the artists themselves, currently feel like they have the freedom to express themselves. And another value that we have is diversity and inclusion. So, are people of different walks of life, different backgrounds, do they all feel equally willing and able to express themselves in Hong Kong today as we know it?
If you were to ask me this question, say 5 years ago, I think my answer would be slightly different than it is today. Because we all know what happened after 2019 with the social unrest, and then followed the national, the NSL, the National Security Law. And it seems that now, every time you come across this phrase of freedom of expression, and people automatically will jump into the conclusion, or at least give the impression that, well, we don't exactly have that kind of freedom today after the passing of the law. Now, everyone has their own interpretation. I will not judge any of your interpretation, but to me, listen, First of all, it is too easy for each of us to blame everything on the law. To me, the law is very specific. It's not the law. There's nothing against. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the law. Who's going to be subverting a government? Nobody's going to do that. The question is how you interpret the law. And a lot of time now is that a lot of people second guessing what exactly is the right interpretation of the law. So you think about it, right? It can be another hour discussion here, but I'm going to give you the short version. From my understanding, it's not the law itself, it's how every one of us interpreting of it. Now, of course, there are also those who say, well, is that self-censorship? Yeah, it could be. People start questioning because we never used to have to worry about that. And I think we've gone from too extreme to one end. Now maybe we've gone too far to the other end. But to me, it's very straightforward. By the way, thanks to my current job in West Kowloon, having spent some time with Palace Museum and now M+, I learned myself too, how to your other point, how to respect that diversity. I mean, I have my own interpretation of what I consider is appropriate. What kind of art form I prefer. But it's not up to me. As a chair, by the way, this is always my best defense. Because, when people ask, wow, do we still have curatorial control? I said, as a chair, I'm the last person to decide what's on that wall. By the way, I have my Palace Museum director and the deputy museum director in the front row. You can ask them. I have absolutely zero say in what they choose. In fact, I don't even know how they decide which treasure they decide to borrow from Beijing. It's not up to me. But this is how I think it's important. We got to respect others. Now, I can tell you that if you look at M+, not everyone will agree with what's been exhibited there. Right? Well, exactly to the point, because these are contemporary art. And there's an infamous sushi bar at my museum. Even me, I was like, wow, okay. Wow. Anyway, but I have to respect that, right? So I think the key message is we allow that freedom of expression in Hong Kong. We allow obviously the first thing first is it legal? Of course it's legal. If it's not legal, none of us will be displaying, none of the museum and the institution of Hong Kong would dare to display them. So it's not about legality. It's about interpretation. Is it appropriate? But here, to me, it's important is we allow them to be displayed. The question is, we need to educate the audience how to respect the difference of that expression. It's so easy to say a freedom of expression. It's very free, but we don't actually teach them to respect that expression. I know in many of my alma mater in the US, we continuously promote diversity, inclusion. It's so easy to use these buzzwords, diversity, inclusion. But we don't actually teach them how to respect that diversity and inclusion. That's why you hear all these very heated debates nowadays in the US and elsewhere, right? Because I think we are still not quite there yet. I mean, Hong Kong is also in its learning journey to figure out, what that all means. But we are on the same in the same boat. But I think it's important that we allow that freedom expression here. But even more important is we teach them, and I think that's why both of the Palace Museum and the M+ Museum, we focus a lot on that education as well. We don't just simply display them. It's no meaning if you just. I always say that it's just an object. It's more important is the story behind. And you allow the people to understand what's the story behind. We have a great storyteller. I have to mention them, Daisy. We have an amazing storyteller. I mean, I have, when I was asked to be the chair for Palace Museum, I was so embarrassed because I know so little about Chinese art. And to be even more blunt, I wasn't that interested in Chinese art. But Daisy really makes a whole difference. She can interpret things so differently. When I look at it, I say, wow, even the story behind, the emperor is so fascinating, and you learn to appreciate that. We're not necessarily ask you to like it, We're not, by the way, I'm not ever asked people to like something or not, but the important thing is to teach them how to respect that differences or to respect that culture. I think that's already good enough, good first step.
I'm glad you mentioned self-censoring because, it's my sense that some of that is going on within the various institutions locally. And so the fact that you were able to address that, and I think your point about education is so important, whether it's happening in museums or
well, just let me talk a little bit more about this self-censorship. The self-censorship thing is not just a Hong Kong thing, it's now a global thing, right? So when you bring in this difficult dialogue, right, whether it's, I'm not talking about Hong Kong now, I'm talking about globally, right? Yes, you are free to express yourself now, but I suppose there is a limitation to how free that can be, because you can't draw something or do something deliberately to offend someone else's culture. Can you imagine you doing that in Europe on these ethnicity issue, culture, religious issues, political issues? These are topics these days that it's not just because you're free to express that is the right thing to do, right? And that dialogue is very, I hear that everywhere in the world have that same sort of challenges. So it's very easy to say, well, self-censorship. But then I think the artist themselves needs to, or whoever, they need to respect as well. Yes, you can express that. Obviously, it's a topic of concern. That's why the piece is done. But at the same time, you have to understand that you cannot cross that line so much that you start to offend somebody else. While you're probably still legal, but you can imagine, the emotions that comes along with that. It will be very difficult to manage, and I see that everywhere. It's not just a Hong Kong thing.
Well, thank you. Lest we have an audience who thinks we're going to just talk about politics, freedom of expression this whole hour. That is not the purpose, but it was a good foundational conversation because we want to talk about art.
Well, especially you have some American audience overseas. It's important that this message, because to them, Hong Kong is all politics today, which is completely not true. Right. So, but I'm glad we address it. Even better if they can come to Hong Kong and see for themselves, come to check out my museum, then see for themselves how much room we still have for that kind of freedom of expression.
Great, thank you. So you've been really involved in the arts for the last 6-7 years, if my memory serves me correctly about your background. And Hong Kong is so well known as a financial hub. I'm really interested to know a little bit more about the background on how the West Kowloon Cultural District came about. There's been a tremendous amount of investment that's gone into the district and into the museums themselves. And now everything's open. So tell us a little bit about the background, how it evolved, and where it's going.
Mark, thank you so much to give me this opportunity to not just to tell your friends overseas. I think even for a great majority of Hong Kong people, they have no idea, how this journey started and how much money we already have, the government have already spent on the West Kowloon. And to be very honest with you, I mean, you said I've been about 6-7 years. Yeah, but like most Hong Kong people, we don't look at the details. It wasn't until this it's about 7-8 months ago that, because I got asked this question so often that I said, I better go and do some homework myself, right? Because we took for granted a lot of times. And also these days, we tend to just read the headlines, the title, the captions, and we never go down to the details. So when I did this homework, I realized, oh wow, this whole idea of arts and culture in Hong Kong the journey started 25 years ago. It was first mentioned in the policy address of our first chief executive, Mr. C.H. Tung, 1998. In his 1998 policy address, he has one sentence that mentioned, he didn't even say West Kowloon Cultural District. It was just arts and culture, So it's 25 years in making. Now, of course, then we spent 10 years, a very typical Hong Kong, we spent 10 years arguing what we should do, how we should do it. Again, we don't have the time, but those of you who follow that will know, then We have this whole, what do you call it, sky roof, right? There was a sky roof design, that things. Anyway, so the West Kowloon Cultural District was not until 2008. It was established in 2008. So 98, 2008, we spent 10 years back and forth. Because you know why? Because to most people, even me, it wasn't until maybe say 10 years ago that I'm finally convinced that this is for real. Because for the longest time, when we, especially in the beginning from 98 to 2008, in the minds of most people in Hong Kong, say, yeah, right. It's all about money, it's about property, right? This whole West Kowloon, come on. It's just going to be another similar project right next door to here, Cyberport. So because you know why? Because why would you give up that kind of money? So the entire West Kowloon Cultural District, 40 hectares. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't matter, but let me just give you some numbers. Hong Kong people are very good at numbers because they know how much money we're talking about here. 40 hectares. Out of the 40 hectares, 23 hectares are designated for public open space. Now, I was one of those who championed that public open space because we need in Hong Kong. We need a Hyde Park or a Central Park, so a Hyde Park London or Central Park New York type of space in Hong Kong. So I'm one of those who really push it, and we got it, right? 23 hectares out of the 40 hectares. But guess what? In other words, you don't make money on the 23 hectares, right? You don't make money on the 23 hectares. And out of the remaining 17 hectares, we are allowed to build 850,000 square meters of space, buildable space, 850,000. And out of the 850,000, 40% is designated for arts and culture institutions. Arts and culture. That's where the Palace, the Sichu, the M+, and the Future Lyric Center, Free Space, and so on. 40%. And by the way, for those who are not familiar, I just want to be sure to you that you don't make money in arts and culture facilities. In fact, not only you don't make money, you only lose money, right? So I think it's already public information. I think it's public. If it's not, I'm in trouble, but I'm going to tell you, our operating loss so far for this year, I mean for the last calendar year, is about $1 billion Hong Kong dollars. So, but we are able to, we've been doing cost control, cost cutting, so I think we bring it down to just under 800 million losses, and per annum. But of course, to me, it's not a loss, it's an investment. It's an investment for the future. So that 40% you don't make money, right? Even already, not just talk about ticket sales, that's including ticket sales, venue hire, to F&B, to sponsorship. Everything ends, you still lose money. I was told the Mets in New York, the cost recovery is only 38, 36%. Right? Tate Modern is the best, it's 50%. Today at Hong Kong Palace Museum is 44, 45%. So is M+. But so that's already probably the best they can do. But so we need funding for the rest. I'll come to that later on. So that's 40%. And then the remaining 40% is residential and commercial. We do need residential and commercial. The income from the residential and commercial to fund the arts and culture project. That's the Hong Kong model. I was told the US model, thanks to my colleagues here, the US models are largely funded by big family, foundation, endowments. And the European models are state funded. The Hong Kong model, what else? Property related, but because otherwise, who's going to fund all these things? So, but to give you, I know you want to get back to the question. Now, what I'm trying to convince you here is that this is not a journey that we can now get out. You know how much money to date the Hong Kong government already has spent on the West Kowloon Cultural District, not just on those who already built on top, is the infrastructure, not counting the reclamation. The reclamation is not counted, that's another amount. But just on the basic infrastructure of West Kowloon so far built, and those arts and culture facilities on top, over 6 billion US dollars. And it's only 45% built. We still have another 55% of arts and culture facility to be built. By the way, we don't have money, so we're not going to build those things yet. That's a huge commitment, 6 billion US dollars. This is not going to be turning back, right? So I'm so grateful to Mr. Tung and all the other chief executives all these 25 years have laid this foundation for Hong Kong. I mean, we used to be, I mean, we do have arts and culture, but the scale that we're talking about today is nothing like what we ever have. And it's definitely put Hong Kong in the map, in the world map. So thank you for allowing me to explain to my audience, both here and overseas.
No, I'm really glad that you're so open during the program. I do want to talk a little bit about something you just touched on, which is, I moved here from Silicon Valley, and I'm very much a believer in ecosystems, not just housing things in buildings exclusively. And so I'm wondering, in the arts and culture and the innovation, because there's a lot of innovation going on in art as well, in those areas, whether we're doing enough and whether there's a plan to do more to create more of a ecosystem within the fabric of the community that engages the community beyond the walls, beyond the four walls of the museums.
Mark, I'm so glad you raised this topic on ecosystem. And again, I never thought, if this is 10 years ago, I never thought this is gonna make it, because we exactly need that ecosystem to amplify, right? It can't be just public. It has to be public and private. But thanks to this anchor, this $6 billion investment, US dollar investment, to put the anchor here. But beyond that, it's also, first, now, obviously, you're talking about the hardware, right? So the hardware, okay, well, I guess it's about money. We put up that money. But more importantly now, it's the software, the people. So the question is, do we have the software first or the hardware first? Well, you can have this conversation forever. But to me, now that we have the hardware, we got to bring in the software. We got to train the people, and that's why we're able to draw. Because of the hardware, we're now able to draw the talents, both to Amplus and to Palace Museum, because people are convinced that people are willing to come here. But then it's not just the overseas talents. We also need to groom domestic talent. But again, until you have that ecosystem, there is no career. Today we have. Last year I met a gentleman, and I don't know him. I met him for the first time, and after brief discussions, and I forgot what topic, he then told me, "Oh, my son is now working at your Amplus." I said, "Oh, really?" And apparently he's doing installation and so on. So, and I thought, wow. Compared to that 40 years ago, as I said, my parents will kill me if I tell him that I'm going to go into, the arts and culture space. But today, I think the generation is different. The parents, and they're very willing. I mean, they think, wow, this is great. So the younger generation, first of all, definitely very embracing. But even the parents' generation also find it, they can willing to accept. So that's one thing. So I think the software side is important. Then, even more important is the audience, right? So, if West Kowloon is just for the Hong Kong 7-8 million people, I say, well, I don't know whether it's now where my head as a businessman. I'm not so sure the numbers will add up. But we have now a rising middle class in China of 400 million people. Their desire to have better quality of life, whether it's in healthcare, educations, jobs, culture, arts and culture. Of course, they can get it onshore, but they also would like to get it from offshore. So West Kowloon is a perfect place for them. With the high-speed rail, we are within 1 hour from anywhere in GBA. GBA easily have 50, 60 million people that would want to come, right? But that's just China, 400 million, rising middle class. You look at ASEAN, That's 180, 190 million middle classes as well. So this entire region, talking about 500 million people, and that is going to push up the demand as well. So that ecosystem is finally here, right? Both supply and demand side. And that's why it's working. If you to ask me 10 years ago, I said, well, I'm not so sure. But now we have the right ingredients for that journey to really to start that journey. So the 2 out of the 3 largest contemporary art auction houses have their headquarters based in Hong Kong. Right? So recently, one of them opened. I went to the opening. I asked the chairman, of course I know the answer, but I just want to make sure that it comes from his mouth. I asked him, why you decided to headquarter in Hong Kong? And he said, well, 1/3 of the global sales of his company is from this region. So that's why I am so convinced this ecosystem now is finally, in shape. But of course, it's still a journey. It was still a long way to go to groom the talents and so on and so on.
And maybe perhaps, there are some government policies that can be put in place to provide subsidies related to housing or things like that. We don't need to get into all those details, but to build that ecosystem, there might be some incentives that need to be put in place. But you just touched on the next question that I had, which was related to how do you attract, I know there are a lot of the auction houses, and there are a lot of shipping and logistics and storage companies related to art here in Hong Kong, we found out recently. How do you attract, not just waiting for them to show up and, open up a headquarters here in Hong Kong, but are you doing anything like proactively to really go out and try to attract more galleries, attract more auction houses, attract more artists, collectors to actually come to Hong Kong and be part of the ecosystem?
So M Plus was opened November 21. And I was there at the opening. I wasn't the chairman at the time, but I was there at the opening. And, well, it was largely in-house because the rest of the world is not here, right? Actually, I kind of felt bad because for my predecessor, because, so much work he put in, Dr. Vincent Low, Victor Low, Dr. Victor Low, our former chairman of M Plus, he put in so much work and the opening and so on, but the world is not back. And we had a M Plus International Dinner this past March, coincide with the Art Basel week. And we invite everyone back to Hong Kong. That evening felt like the opening dinner because everyone was there. It was amazing. So at my head table, I'm the second head table. I'm the West Kowloon Cultural District Vice Chairman. My chairman is Dr. Henry Tang, and he was at the head table. At my head table, seated on my left, was the director for Tate Modern. To her left was the director for Guggenheim. And across from my table is from Picasso Museum, the Qatar Museum, you name it. The entire world of art, who's and who, was in Hong Kong. And that was a dinner for 200, and there was another to follow with, that's a who's and who of the 200, and then there was another party that actually came after that. It was 3,000 people all over the world. I remember specifically after the dinner, I asked my museum director, Suhanya, I said, Suhanya, do we pay for any of them to come to Hong Kong? They said, no, we didn't pay. They fly in Hong Kong. Of course, they flew here not just for us, but also Art Basel Week and Museum Summit and so on. You know why? Because everyone that I spoke to was telling me, you have an amazing museum. Now, a long story to answer your question, I don't need to promote it. The world will come back now that we open. Just because we're shut to them for 2-3 years, they didn't see it. So I was just on a WhatsApp call with the museum director at my alma mater at Pomona College. Even as a liberal arts small college, the museum director knew about M+. Right? So and she was already communicating with me like giving her the chance to come to Hong Kong. The world know about us already. This is amazing. I mean, finally, after 2-3 years, people is going to come back to check out the. Now, for those who are attracted to contemporary art, they will never hear about Hong Kong Palace Museum, but that's fine, because once they come to see M+, and say, "Whoa, 5 minutes walk, that's a palace." I bet you some will go and check it out. Equally, those who are attracted to come to check out Hong Kong Palace Museum, they'll come and say, "Oh, that's M+. What the hell is M+? Let's go check it out." That's the ecosystem I'm talking about. And by the way, it's not just a public institution, like private galleries, right? Just like you go to New York, you don't just go to the Met. You go to, Soho, you go to, everywhere, right? And that's the ecosystem you need. You need both the blockbuster show, but you also see local. Those who come to Hong Kong, they want to see specific local artists, right? So I think you must have those different offerings for your different audience as well.
I'm glad you said that. Just by happen chance today, I got an email from one of our local universities here asking if we would collaborate with them to have our top faculty come from UChicago to participate in some programming in the West Kowloon district. So I think that kind of...
Ask him to call me.
Okay, I will do that.
I'm serious. Yeah.
We need that. We need those kinds of invitations. We have, not just UChicago, but many of the Western, academic communities are really tops in their field. So if we could bring more of those people to Hong Kong to let them see that things are open and that we're looking to collaborate in many different ways. So let's talk about the competition a little bit. Is there competition? I'd like to know what you see as the real advantages of Hong Kong, Hong Kong's arts community today, vis-a-vis what's going on in Seoul, what may be going on in Tokyo, what Singapore is trying to do with hosting an exhibition a few months ago. Let's talk a little bit about the competition and whether you think Hong Kong can maintain and expand its dominance, not only in the region, but in the world.
Mark, I mentioned earlier that my wife's Singaporean, so we always have this conversation at home. Singapore, Hong Kong, Singapore, Hong Kong, Hong Kong, Singapore. We always have this conversation, but joking aside, right? I forgot to mention, when we talk about the ecosystem, hardware, software, public, private, the audience, is not just Hong Kong. The ecosystem is Asia, right? We shouldn't be, it's not a zero-sum game. So actually, obviously, because of my personal connection, so I'm connecting Thai museums to Hong Kong, right? Equally, we'd love to work with our counterparts in Tokyo and Seoul and everywhere, because we should work and collaborate together. Yes, there's a bit of competition, but then I don't think, I think if I'm a pseudo artist. If you ask the people from the art community, they work and very closely. They know each other, and of course, some of these exhibitions, came from one place or the others. It's just like the Kusama exhibits finished in Hong Kong, and now it's been taken to Spain, to Bilbao Guggenheim Museum. In fact, leveraging Hong Kong's curatorship, now it's going to be showcased in Spain, and so on and so on. So there's a lot of collaboration among museums, and so we should not see that as a competition. I think it's complementary actually to the region. And again, back to what my point earlier, you have that 500-600 million middle class market, so it allows that the numbers will add up. It makes sense, right, for you to have these exhibits coming out to this side of the world.
It's funny. I moved here from Silicon Valley, from San Francisco, and you talk about Asia as the ecosystem, if you will. I would stay up until sometimes 1, 2 o'clock in the morning watching the Christie's or Sotheby's auctions from my house, just curious about what was going on here. Now I'm watching New York auctions at 1 and 2 in the morning. So it's a global market. I mean, it's a global industry market. So many collaboration opportunities across so many of these institutions. It makes me wonder too, because Daisy was kind enough and Louis were kind enough to invite me over to have a tour of the new exhibit at the Palace, the Cartier exhibit, which was fabulous, by the way. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to go see that. Talking about the financial issues that you mentioned earlier, are those kinds of exhibits things that can bring in revenue or funding opportunities? Like how do you and the museum folks think about such kinds of exhibitions?
I mentioned earlier, Palace Museum cost recovery like 40-something, 45, 46. That's already included the sponsorship and everything, right? So it helped, but it's not going to help to balance your book. By the way, now that you mentioned this, so with the idea of bringing Cartier exhibits to Hong Kong, I was the chairman at the time. Mm-hmm. And so the Cartier contacted me, and then of course I then referred to my professional team. But of course, immediately the first thing that came across my mind was that politically appropriate? Now, let's talk about self-censorship. This is definitely self-censorship number one. It's like, do I want to, is that appropriate? Because again, I'm not exactly a museum person myself. So the first thing I asked was that actually politically appropriate for a public institution to associate with a branded company? Yeah. Although, of course, it's history, jewelry, but it's still Cartier. Because I'm sure there will be people out there. It's like, why are you helping them to promote, right? So that was the first thing, because that was kind of my job. My job is making sure that, that people won't criticize us for allowing them to use our museum to promote their work, right? But then, of course, I later discovered that actually. They do it. Even this infamous Cartier collection is in Beijing. It's in everywhere. So it's okay. And the fact that there was a story that it's so on and so on and so on. But then of course it is Cartier, so they are willing to invest. So if you go to the exhibition today, it's amazing. For those of you who haven't been there, please do go. You only pay $120, right? Am I correct? You pay $120, but the cost is way more than $120. So it's fully subsidized, not by us, but definitely also by Cartier too, because they are investing in that show. So it's kind of like a win-win. So people, we all benefit from going to check them out. Of course, there is a commercial value for them too. Mm-hmm. So this is our job to making sure that we strike that balance. We have to bring value to our audience, but of course it has a commercial angle there for the sponsors. Mm-hmm. We did that with the Liechtenstein collections, where LGT Bank sponsor us. And that's Palace. Of course, at the M+, we have HSBC sponsoring us for 2 years. Mm-hmm. And that helps also the Kusama exhibits as well, and so on and so on. So I think, and as again, I was told that this is actually quite common in the museum world overseas. Yeah. So, but of course, in Hong Kong, it's always very sensitive. It's like, we got to make sure, because it's a new journey for us, right? So we have to make sure that we have to strike that right balance to make sure that public interest is always in our mind, because we are public institutions.
Well, I have to admit, and I didn't tell your team this, but I was doubtful, like you, of that kind of exhibition. But when I saw it, I was so impressed how the team was able to weave in the historical aspects of the Cartier journey into the exhibition. I thought it was really, really well done. And so all my doubts were dissipated after I took a tour of the exhibition. But it is you do think about these things. Is it a conflict? How will the public perceive it? So it's good that you are all thinking about those questions. They're very important questions.
That's my self-censorship number one. I gotta make sure that. So when you say self-censorship, it's not just politics. Yeah. It's a lot of everything.
Yeah.
And it's appropriateness.
It's in human nature, probably, in some respects, right? One last question before we turn it over to the audience. So we all know that Hong Kong has a bit of a talent issue right now, and I'm wondering if how much you've thought about, and you're sort of having internal discussions about bringing more talent to Hong Kong, especially that can help in the arts and the Western Kowloon district, specifically in the museums.
I think I mentioned earlier that the entire West Kowloon Cultural District is probably at the most, I would say the birth of the entire district is at the most appropriate time ever. I'm pretty sure 25 years ago, we didn't see this. But today, thank goodness, we have the cultural district. Why? To your point, you asked me about talent. To me, the so-called talent that we want to attract today, globally, retaining local talent and attracting new talents, or hopefully bring some back from our own, is no longer about jobs, right? Today, jobs you can have your jobs anywhere, right? But most importantly, is where you're going to put your family, right? You're going to bring someone out. They don't just look for the job now. It's where they're going to put the family. They can work Monday through Friday, right, in a different location, but where the family locate is the most important. Or even nowadays, you can do, virtually so easily. So to put the family, what are the things they consider? Safety, right? Number one, everyone I spoke to is consideration safety. Is it safe? Then, of course, next thing is education. Is that do they have good institutions there for the kids? Then, of course, most of the questions are actually family related. The job is one thing, but beyond the job, the money, then the next thing is about the quality of life. So safety, housing, education, arts and culture. Because they don't want the kids to come, or the family, the spouse just to come and what? Nothing. But they want to experience the cultures and the learning. So I think the arts and culture is a key component. And this is exactly what I told our chief executive. I said, this is not just about arts and culture for those who appreciate arts and culture. Arts and culture is for everyone. It's one of the major tools for us to retain talents today that will attract them. There's a lot of cities here. I got to be careful. I don't want to get into this whole debate of which city and which. But I tell you, they do compare. There are some cities, some other cities in the region, they don't have what we have today, right? We complete the whole journey, the offerings. So I think, clearly, this whole talent issue is not just us, it's everywhere. It's the UK. I just spoke to someone 2 days ago in UK, and they are looking for the exact talent that we're looking for too. Everyone are facing the same crisis. So I think what really, because it's not up to us, it's up to that person. Where you ask the talent, where did they choose? Where would they choose? Their place they want to work, and where they want to put their family. So I think, we can go on forever, but I think this whole arts and culture thing is coming as an amazing timing for us to give us at least a story to sell. Imagine without this, then you're thinking, okay, I come here, I got to work 9 to 5, weekend I can go to Disney, Ocean Park, and what else? I have friends now telling me that, wow, we have so many things happening around the clock. Apart from West Kowloon Cultural District, we have Daegun. By the way, I'm the chair also. By the way, we have an amazing exhibition right now going on. Daegun, please come to visit.
Which one?
Patricia Piccinini, please do go. I'm a good salesman.
We'll add that to the resume. Okay, you're a good salesman. Do you have an NFT?
I don't have one yet.
Okay.
Although I have been suggested I should NFT my own artwork. Yeah.
Actually, after looking at it, I think it might be very conducive to that. So you should work on that. I'm sure we have questions now from the audience. We have microphones. Lillian, thank you. And we have one in the back there, the young lady in the back.
So here comes the difficult questions.
Oh, okay. Then I didn't do my job.
Thank you, Bernard. Dorothy Chen with Alum. And I have one comment or one suggestion and a question. So on the first one is more on audience development. I'm curious, given your multiple hats, and also you mentioned GBA earlier, have you thought of, or maybe it's in the works, a museum pass that would link all the GBA museums together, and or also for perhaps the upcoming M Plus with IM Pay. Were there ways to develop like a city architectural tour around it so that we can bring the architectural elements to everyday's life? Because I think that would be like making it accessible to young people will help, or even mom and dads will be help. So that's something that just a random idea. And the question is more on the funding side. You mentioned like in the U.S. is a lot of family-based, and I'm curious, is there room to establish endowments in Hong Kong? In a sense that, if I remember correctly, Daniel Weiss of the Met mentioned that when he joined the institution 7 years ago, it was in a complete disarray, and what saved them during COVID was because of they have the endowment, and he also reconfigured how everything is booked, like come through every single line item in the books, and I was wondering like, what are your response or thoughts about the endowment approach?
Thank you. Definitely, building up the endowment is definitely is in our top priority as well. In fact, the government actually gave us 21.6 billion Hong Kong dollars as a form of endowment too, but we use them all up. So we need to build up an endowment, and we need private participation for sure. We're working on it. And your other suggestions about the tour, I'll definitely take that into consideration. But to come back to your first questions, and this is an important one. Just now I did not complete that whole story, but I did highlight the fact that we are losing money, right? And because you have to lose money, you don't expect to make money. So what happened was over the last 1-2 years, we have been cutting back our expenses. So my colleagues in the front from the Palace Museum, they all understand. They all have to go through cost cutting. So now we have a happy problem. You know what the happy problem is? Well, to the last 20 minutes, I've been trying to convince Mark that this is fantastic, people coming here, great, this is coming. Well, this is the problem. The demand is huge, but we are working on very thin of support right now. I tell you, we have a lot of problem. Our ticketing system is terrible. We need to work on it, but of course we need money and people. I mean, I have a problem, put it this way. The demand now outgrown what a system. Well, the system, if enough resources, okay, but the resources right now is very thin, right? So we have a lot of issues. We don't have time to go through every one of them, but we are aware of that. So at a certain point, we need to start investing as well. But this is a dilemma, right? Because meantime, we are losing 800 million annually right now. Entire district. So we need to justify investing. So this is the dilemma, how much we prepare to invest while we have to be answerable to the public, right? Because I'm sure LegCo will start asking, how are you going to fund it? Have you done enough cost control? And so on and so on. But right now the demand is so big that I think, hopefully it allows us to justify further investment into manpower, into the system, and so on, and system upgrade. Even though we just opened, but mind you, another thing too, both Palace and M+, I think when we make those forecasts and budget a couple of years ago, because we are, by the way, in case you're not aware, we are all startups. We're all startups. So again, it's work in progress, because I think whatever is even before my time, whoever that forecasted earlier, the numbers, the cost and everything, it was not accurate. Why the 21.6 billion endowment was all used up? Because whoever decided back then, 10, 15 years ago, I mean, we haven't done this before. Of course, there's cost escalations and also other reasons. But so today we look at, wow, we missed those targets by a lot. But now after we run for 1 year, 2 years, we now have a much better idea how much it was going to cost us annually. So Museum Director Lewis now know exactly, after 1 year operation, he more or less now knows the cost. And he also know how much more we need to improve it too. But if we look back 5 years ago, when we planned this thing, it was just a guess. Well, it's a good educated guess, but it's still a guess, a forecast. But today we have a much clearer picture how much it will cost us and how much more money we need to generate to support the program. But your advice is good. We need to look into see. And again, if you talk about those kind of things, because we got so many people reach out to us. They say we want to do this, we want to do that for us. Fantastic. Because where's the money?
Yeah.
Who's going to help us to pay for it? So we love sponsorship. If we can have people sponsoring, for example, we have, if I'm not mistaken, Sinoland, right? Sinoland is supporting tickets for school students to come to Palace Museum, right? Because it's so often now you hear, oh, the school kids should go. Great, the school love it. But who's going to pay for Hong Kong Palace Museum to deal with this massive student tour? Nobody think about that. They think, we should do that. I say, of course I know I should do that, but where's the resources? But thank goodness the team managed to convince Sinoland, can you pay for it? So they sponsor the school tour and so on and so on. So we need that. So we need to find commercial or family foundation or family offices to help to fund for these amazing other things we can do to leverage on the hard asset we already have. Education program, this program, that program. But each of these needs resources, right? So that kind of thing. So I think those ideas I will take back to talk to my colleagues, and we'll definitely we'll take that into consideration.
You said something really near and dear to my heart, which is you're a startup. And I know Louis and Daisy and yourself have startup DNA. But when you hire new talent, do you have a mechanism for training them, for educating them, for helping them develop that startup DNA to find the new opportunities for revenue? Not just cutting costs all the time, but find and then pursue and actively go get those new opportunities.
Well, I have to say, I'm not exactly in the executive level. I'm sure Louis and Daisy will tell you more. But at my level, I can tell you the most important thing is the attitude, right? And that applies to not just arts and culture, to any startups, right? So you have to have that attitude, that it's a can-do attitude. Yeah. Without that, we're never going to make it, right? With that can-do, then, well, we just have to figure it out, how to make it work, you know?
And it starts at the top. So,
yes.
Having good leadership is really important.
I keep reminding Louis, okay, we got a problem, okay, we'll figure out how to fix it, right? Yeah. Because you're going to have problem. Right. Every startup, or in fact, more than just startup these days, but surely there's always a problem, right? They're sensitive topic. Surely there will be a sensitive topic, but well, let's find a way to get around with it. Let's work on it. I think that is important. But I think the trouble today is, I think complacency is a problem. People tend to think, well, let's not deal with it. It's too troublesome. I think that's increasingly is the problem for us, because especially everything can so easily be politicized these days on anything, right? So
anywhere.
So people start saying, well, let's not even bother. That's the problem. Yeah, because it's too much work. Yeah, right. It's too much work, and also, what's in for me, right? To take on this thing. So I think that is the worst combination. So I would hope that my colleagues in the entire district can find reason. We need to motivate them to have this right attitude, right? To motivate, because it's not easy, right? So it's so easy that you take an easy way out, but we have to obviously. I think for those who are with us, I bet that they only have one motivation, and that is the love of Hong Kong. But otherwise, why bother? As I think, come back to the talent thing, right? You can be anywhere these days. You can do any jobs anywhere. But why you want to stay here? You stay here because you love Hong Kong and you want to make it work. The same applies to me. Why would I bother to take on all these thankless jobs? If it's not because this is my home, we want to make it work. And I think all my teams feel the same way. Whether or not they're local, they don't have to be local. Right. my entire executive teams are from everywhere, right? So we have local, we have Daisy. I don't even know where you are, but where you're from anymore. But if you look at AMP+, we have South Korea, we have Australia, we have Spain, you name it. But they all came here because they want to make it work.
And I think that diversity is part of the culture that can help drive those motivations too. At least I find that in our own environment on this campus. So we probably have other questions. Young lady in the back on the edge of the row.
Thank you. Like you said, the love of Hong Kong, right? Like, I'm a long-time Hong Konger, and I apologize, we didn't learn Cantonese in time. So now there's a new group of expats coming into Hong Kong, right? Like, we've been here almost 30 years. What do you think about creating what do you think about creating like English-speaking channel? For like in New York, we always compare Hong Kong to London, New York, right? How about English-speaking channel for those who are arriving new, maybe just only cultural channel? After Star World closed down, I cried for 3 days because there's no more channel that relates directly to Hong Kong. To get local news in English, I have to tune into Singapore Asian news or read South China Morning Post. So this is my suggestion, like to create some cultural channel about ballet. So much is happening in Hong Kong and around, but so that we all can relate and no need to wait for my staff from the office to translate for me what's new coming up. Just a suggestion. As you said, the love of Hong Kong, that's what's driving me.
Fantastic. I tell you, those who know me will attest that I've been pushing that as well. Hong Kong is not just another city in China. We are the most international city in China. And to be international, we need to be able to converse and I think it is true. I have the exact same experience and it bothers me that again, it's very challenging for a politician like me to say anything. Otherwise, it will be easily interpreted something else. But yeah, Channel News Asia. Why am I watching Channel News Asia for the news here? Because they don't necessarily, because there's a lack of that. The reason why Channel News Asia is doing a good job because there is no English channel that. Each country do have, but you don't have something like a Channel News Asia where that is so accessible. So we do. I think whether we have a arts and culture channel, I need to find money for that. But I do understand what you're saying. How do we make it more accessible so people understand what's happening in the city, right? You don't just only read the, what was that magazine? That only one magazine. Time Out, that's right. It's only like Time Out to find out what's happening in the town. We need more of that. I take your suggestions seriously. I will bring that to the chief executive to let him know because it's government's money. Is to do that.
Yeah, so maintaining Hong Kong's stature in Asia as an international city is an important priority.
Yeah.
And it helps to bridge these cultural divides that are often language related. And I encourage everybody who's not from Hong Kong or mainland originally to start studying Cantonese or Mandarin. I think it's good to do it both ways. So we probably have another question or two before we have to let Bernard go. In the back row on the left.
Hello. You are a very good salesman. You painted all perfect, but I would like to ask you a couple questions. First, what is your contribution, your legacy you want to build from your tenure at M+, West Kowloon? And second, what is the most challenging issue that you have right now?
What was the first question again? You want what
legacy do you want to
what
leave?
legacy? Yes. See, very interesting you bring this up because when I first show up to my first board meeting at M+, someone said something similar. He said, "Oh, I forgot. Was it a question or was that a statement?" But definitely the word legacy came out, and that took it kind of by surprise. Like, why is it my legacy? I'm not doing it for myself. I would do it for Hong Kong. It's not my legacy. And that is so important that we make sure that I reminded myself, at the time when someone mentioned that at the board meeting, and I was like, is that how people think me taking up this job is to build my legacy? If that's the case, I need to make sure that it is not. Because the last thing I want, that people think that, oh, again, these jobs are given to people that have as a self-agenda. That's what happened to Hong Kong. And people just sometimes say, oh, nobody's doing it for free. They must do it for a reason. My reason is very simple. If you ask me what legacy, well, maybe I have one. If you want to ask it that way. It's not about me. It's about my next generation. I have 2 sons. My motivation today in doing whatever I'm doing is to make sure that this city is still a vibrant city enough for them to come and stay. If I fail, if I can't even, the fact that I have access to these things, if I fail to convince them, the next generation of Hong Kong, my sons and many hundreds of others, to stay, then it's my failure. Well, at least my part. That's my motivation. Back to your problem about attracting talents. This is exactly what we needed. We need to convince them there is a future here. Why? If I'm not even convinced, and why would they stay? If they're not staying, why would the rest of the Hong Kong, the next gen, would stay, right? So maybe that's a legacy, but it's not me. I have to make sure that this city is the future for them. At least one of the futures. They have choices. They have so many choices. They have so many choices that they can choose. So, and I hope that, so that's number one.
Do you have the specific goals? Because you are very generic.
Well, you see, the thing is, the reason I decided to come here to share, in fact, I've been going everywhere to share, is because people don't even know what has happened. As I said, we spent $6 billion so far, and more coming, because it's not the end of it. And the fact that we are committed to build this city up, at least on the arts and culture and many others, so they need to know. They need to know, because everything you hear about Hong Kong is about, people leaving, on this and that. So all you hear is about one side of that story. What people don't realize is that a lot of people behind the scene working so hard. By the way, I just do the talking. These guys in the front row are working their ass off to make it happen. So don't listen to me, listen to them. I'm just a salesman. But the problem is, salesman's important too, because people are even not convinced this is the case. So I need to tell them that hundreds and hundreds of people behind the scene is trying to make this place work. And it is working. But it takes time, right? It takes time to build, and it's a journey. So that's number one. Any plan? Well, to me, I think the fact that now is, if you to say a plan, I tell you a story. After that international dinner, late March, I was like, wow, my counterparts everywhere in the world are telling me that this is fantastic. So immediately I have a chance. I met with the chief executive. So I told him, you got to ride on this momentum. This is amazing momentum. So shortly after, his assistant reached out to me and said, what should the government do? I said, well, you don't have to do anything other than give me more money. You just have to give me more money so I can bring the best show. If I can bring the next Kusama, another blockbuster show to Hong Kong, we have another big show coming up in the Palace Museums. I can mention the name, right? It's already made known. What is Sanjin Doining? What's it called? I can't repeat that. So Sanjin Doi, but I don't know the English name. So if we can bring these amazing exhibits to Hong Kong, it would catch the world's attention. So my aunt, as I mentioned, all my relatives are from Bangkok. My aunt, 79 years old, I was shocked. As soon as Hong Kong opened up, no more restriction, she came to Hong Kong for Bangkok, not a long trip. Day trip. She took the morning flight to Hong Kong, arrived by noon, went to M+, because she's a Kusama fan apparently, stayed there for 3.5 hours and took the 7 p.m. flight back to Bangkok. Day trip. This is what the ecosystem we're now talking about. People will fly in because, but then we can't always have blockbuster shows. So you have other types of shows, but then it complement each other. But I think, it's just like New York and London. People go to New York and London. They don't just go there to make money. They go to conferences. They go there to go ballet. They go to see Broadway. They see museums and so on and so on. That's what Hong Kong is going to be. This is my aspiration. I think Hong Kong can be the New York and London. I think for those who grew up in Hong Kong, we've always been known as a place to make money. I think we are beyond that now. And the next generation, priority is different too. I mean, our generation is probably all about money. Today, younger generation, they don't want just about money, they're about all other things, right? So I think I'm hoping that Hong Kong can provide that different offerings for them.
For the Western community, expatriate community that may be only here for a couple of years, or in the case of the lady in the back who's been here for maybe a few decades, what would you suggest that they can do to be more involved? If we love the city, what would you recommend that we can do to get more involved and not just be on the outside looking in?
Well, today, of course, it's a happy problem because we're actually getting a lot of requests. People want to help, like, well, how can we help? And but I think first thing first, and that's why I'm here today, is to at least get the message out. I mean, unfortunately, the last three plus years, after the social unrest and we have the COVID semi-lockdown and so on, we have somewhat been like disconnected from the world. So everywhere I go, I feel like, I have to go explain to them that, no, things are actually okay. We're safe. These things are happening here. So I think if each of you can help to actually just relate the message, and most importantly, don't trust me. Ask them to come and see them for themselves. When people ask me, do you still have one country, two system? Oh, please come and check out my museums. See for yourself. And that's it. And so I know, but it's now, I'm sorry, tickets are expensive, very expensive still. It's probably not until next year that the ticket price will come down. So I know it's not easy to come back, but at least you plan the message now. But when they come back and they'll see for themselves, what's actually happening. China wants Hong Kong to remain international. They keep reminding us that message. In fact, in one of I hosted a conference. I have another capacity as the Our Hong Kong Foundation. We hosted a conference last month, and the head of the liaison office in Hong Kong, he in his speech, he specifically said, he actually repeated a comment made by Deng Xiaoping in the 80s. And the comment was, dancing continues, horse racing continues, stock market continue. But those three things was not his comment. It was Deng Xiaoping, 80. But he added two more. He added two more remarks to so he mentioned those three, but he also mentioned two more. And what was those two? It was actually, sadly to say, and this is a problem in media today, it was not reported at all in the international news, not the English news, some local news, right? Because the local news actually focused on those three things, but failed to mention the other two. What's the other two? He said, the director, Jiang, I forgot his pronunciation in Mandarin, Yan Shong, the director Yan Shong. He said those two other additional remarks he made? Continues to use, he used foreign names, but I think foreign names is actually meaning English names, right? Because we use English names here, right? Continue to use that and continue to speak foreign languages. Again, I think it's references to English. In other words, stay the same, right? We are an international city. We are the East and West gateway. So continue to use that. So he specifically mentioned in his speech, highlighting the fact that that is the role of Hong Kong, right? So back to your earlier point, and I hear you. We have to focus with multiple sets of audience, right? That's our role. We should not just completely turning, just local. Obviously, the local audience is huge. The rise of that 300-400 million of consumers from the mainland China. So yeah, that is important of our stakeholders. But equally, we also have international stakeholders. So we should not let go of that too. And that's the role of Hong Kong. We have to be that gateway to connect both set of stakeholders.
Great, Bernard. I want to make sure that the tough questions are asked, and we might have time for a couple more, and that you also have a chance to express anything that we didn't cover today with the questions. So we'll start in the second row here.
I have a simple question for my old boss at Lingnan University when he was the council chairman. But these days we heard the government and Beijing and Hong Kong talk about science and technology. When you have art and culture towards science and technology, how can we link the two together directly, indirectly, softly? Bernard, you talk about startups. A lot of science and technology are startups. You talk about sponsorships. And you talk about attracting talent because this is a better place with the art and culture. How can those two areas work together for your sponsorships or for whatever you can think of? Thank you.
Thank you, Albert. Again, if you were to ask me 5 years ago this question, I probably would be saying, Albert, why are you creating problem for me? Why are you raising this question, right? But today, I have the perfect answer for you, right? Because technology today is everywhere. It's not just about technology. You have art tech, med tech, anything with a tech for probably can raise money. So, no, technology is now embraced with just about everything, including arts and culture. And it's not just M+, also Palace. I still remember shortly after I was appointed as Palace Museum chair, I went to Beijing with Louis, and I said to Louis, Louis, you can attest to what I said to you. I said, listen, funny enough is even before the museums open, I can already imagine, right? M+ will naturally attract younger audience, whereas a Palace Museum will attract mature audience, okay? Naturally. But I said to Louis, this will be a failure for us if we spend all that money, billions of dollars, just to build a facilities to entertain those who only like whatever they like. There will be a failure. It's far more important that we can attract young people to come to see Palace and more mature audience go to see M+. That's called, to me, my first question you asked, that's truly deal with embracing diversity, right? Diversity meaning not I just respect with diversity and then you have one, I have one, I have one. Well, that's the start, but that's not embracing. More importantly, how do you connect them? But you can't force them, just slowly, right? So I said to Louis, how can we excite people to come to Palace Museum, the young people? Because I'm not so excited myself. So how can you do that? So I said, why don't we use technology? Because the first thing people think about Palace, hundreds and thousands years old thing. So I want to make sure that the young people say, this is actually pretty cool. You come in here, we can use technology to make things fun. I hope we are doing that. Hope we are getting there. So I think technology is today able to enable so many things. Right? Not just science, beyond science, fintech, art tech, you name it. So I think it's the best timing ever for museums today to use technology to enhance their offerings.
Question way in the back with the hat. Thank you.
Hi, Bernard. Thank you very much for your talk today. You mentioned a lot about Hong Kong being the center here in Asia and perhaps in the world to be an international center for art, not just for China, but for an audience to the rest of the world. And I wonder how much of your role being chairing the M+, the West Kowloon Cultural Center, has a little bit of leading in terms of guiding and leading taste preferences, because there is, in my experience, because I represent an Israeli art tech digital art platform, and it's always a challenge, the taste of East and West in their taste in art, because Western art, especially in the new mixed media digital art, it's always about conflict, challenging, provoking. And then Asian art, especially Chinese art, is about harmony, peace, auspiciousness, good luck. And I always have this challenge with our curators in Tel Aviv. I said, no, we can't put that out there because that's too provoking or that's bad luck and things like that. Got to get me some more waterfalls and give me some fishes swimming around a pond, things like that. So isn't this a challenge, for an art center to be here in Hong Kong? Because we're always being challenged, being provoked. And as a matter of fact, recently we had a big digital art piece in Causeway Bay that had to be pulled out because there were some hidden messages in there that was considered probably politically provoking, which goes back again to the first thing that was mentioned in this talk was about the freedom of expression and interpreting that. So how much of your job there is being a taste arbiter, an interpretation arbiter, balancing East and West concept of art?
Thank you. Wow, you can redraft my job description because you're right on it, right? Because it is. Oops, we say by the online. Okay. No, there's a sign here to remind me. But anyway, no, I think you're right on, and I think again I mentioned quite a few times this is a journey, right? Because you are absolutely correct to. I mean, we're generalizing it, of course, but it is true. There is a difference in that culture, East and West culture, and that's why one country, two system is never an easy model, never done anywhere else, right? And so how can we coexist together under one country? We have two systems, two different set of value. You're absolutely correct. I'm learning every day. But the funny thing is, as you said, it's so easy, everyone these days to say, oh, this and this and that. But what they don't understand is so much work behind. Everyone has to, thanks to social media, right? And this is actually, to me, is the biggest nightmare for us now. I think most of the time, nothing is happening, right? Except all of a sudden when you have someone make a comment in social media, and then it just, before you know it, it just got completely gone viral. And the next thing, you're doing damage control. And then you overreact. That's the problem. It's happening. Not just Hong Kong, everywhere in the world now. You can imagine you're the administrator, right? My gosh, you never know what's the next crisis coming. And sometimes it's not even factually correct. All you need is just one comment and just wrongly interpret it, and the next thing, you're in defense. Yeah, so especially when you have two different set of value and system, it's very challenging. So you're right, that's my job. My job is try to figure out well. And hopefully we do a lot of engagement. So actually, to me, my job is engaging as many people as possible at that time, so that they know that. Go back to the question the gentleman asked me earlier. Is the oh no, it's not my agenda. I don't have an agenda. I don't have a legacy, right? In a way, I'm kind of making sure that listen, we all try to make this work. It's not my taste. It's not what I want. But I have to make sure that this is something that everyone can coexist and okay with. This is the problem. I think this is. I find that everyone is, and surely they should. Everyone has an opinion. I'm sure even, well, maybe not this color.
Oh, we talk about this color all the time.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh no, that's what I'm saying, right? Hey. You not necessarily always get everyone agree on everything. And that's the challenge of arts and culture, especially when you have generational differences and culturally differences and so on. It is a huge challenge. And I'm glad you bring it up because it's a journey that obviously, those who are attending today are the converted already. I don't need to convince you. I have a larger audience out there that not even come close to be as liberal as you are.
Can I just drill down on the question, though, that the gentleman with the hat asked, which is there a body within Hong Kong that can prevent the overreaction to the kind of situation that he faced? Or can you create one, Bernard?
I'm not government, not anymore.
You're a convener. You could make a recommendation.
Difficult. Difficult. I think, if I don't think, first of all, it can't be the government, right? That should not be the one government comes into the picture. So, it's, well, I don't know. I haven't thought about that
Maybe
yet.
something to think about.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that yet.
yeah,
Because there's a
yeah.
pros and cons.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Of course,
Then you
yeah.
may overdo it sometime.
Right.
You overreact. Every time that you're like, oh, I have to respond. Then I don't know. That can backfire too.
We have one question here, gentleman with the mask. That'll be our last question.
Thanks. Didn't want to let you get away without asking a generative AI question. I'm Stuart Christie. I'm a dean in the Faculty of Arts at Hong Kong Baptist U. We're active in arts tech. We're building. We're creating lots of fun disruptions around student experience and art. What do you think about generative AI? What is it going to do to the function of art, both in the broader society and for our students who are increasingly are now looking online, looking to generative AI to create new kinds of art, new experiences for art, which are completely virtual, and how, say, will M+ in the future or the Palace Museum, Jeffrey Shaw, a colleague of mine, was active in the Palace Museum. How do you see generative AI impacting all of our institutions? Thank you.
By the way, I visited your center because of the Palace Museum. Now, I mentioned earlier, 40 years ago, as a graduating student in the studio art department, and I mentioned earlier that one of my other graduating students, his main focus was mixed media, and that was pretty much computer work, right? 40 years ago, when I look at that work, I say, wow, is it art? When I look at that, it's like, how can that be art? But it was exciting. I couldn't do it. When I look at that, it's like, mouse. Well, what is art today? That form and shape keep changing, right? So I can only imagine the trend. We're only going to evolve even faster and further. So at the M+, in fact today M+ Museum we have the human one by Beeple being displayed there, and when I first saw that I thought, wow, but it also still crossed my mind is that is this art? But it is art. It's a form of expression, but it's just different types of expression. It's not 2D. It's actually 4D today. So I just only can imagine that, the AI and the sort would even take the art to a next form, a next shape that we don't even know what it is today. And this is the scary part, especially for academia. Or maybe not you, Mark. You're still teaching the old school. But for Baptist or your department, how are you preparing for our next generation, right? Because I'm pretty sure whatever you're teaching them today will probably be obsolete 10 years from now. That is a scary thing, right? Because it's the shape and form and keep revolving and changing, right? But again, it comes back to the attitude, right? How prepared are you willing to accept? Now, of course, while all these things happening, we still have 300, 400 years of old treasure still there. And that's exciting, right? How do you can combine a 300, 500 years old treasure, but yet with technology, you can bring it to something closer. I hate it when I go to the museum and I tell you, without someone like Daisy, who's there to guide me and narrate the story, but you can't have Daisy every day for everyone. So I would hope that one day, not in the very distant future, you have that kind of interactive that allows me to have a Daisy side by side with me as I walking through the exhibit and tell those wonderful stories. I think those days will not be very far. Today you still have, a pre-recorded message, what do you call it, audio. I think it will be 10 years from now. It will be something else.
Plus in the metaverse.
That's right. So that is why it's so exciting. The technology, to Albert's question earlier, enable all these things that we couldn't even think of in the past. And it is happening. So, and especially with the use of the cell phone, everything is transformed. The only problem, though, is this is, again, back to one of my earlier answer to the question is this is a happy problem. We are expecting things to happen like that. But guess what? All this requires money, investment, resources. We don't have that yet. But it will have to happen, right? People are expecting that to happen. So this is the dilemma we are facing is how fast can we, what sort of resources can we to generate to make these enable? I think the technology is there, or soon to be there, but you need the investment, you need the money. And I hope that's why I keep saying the government had to spend more money, and we need to bring in the private sector. The government cannot do alone. We need the private sector to come in to help to fund for all these exciting things that could happen.
Well, let's leave it on that note. Bernard, thank you so much for sharing so openly with our audience today.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I always like to say that our campus, we like to have difficult conversations with people in an open space, and we would welcome you to come back and do it again as we kind of walk through this journey together. So thank you so much for joining us
I told
today.
Mark earlier, before we came in, I said, I'm happy to, not just for this occasion, but in all the future occasions where you have your faculties from Chicago to come and your executive students to come, I'm happy to come and tell them the exciting things happening here. I even told Mark that with the appropriate invitation, I'm happy to go to Chicago as well. Give me a good reason to go to tell our friends in the University of Chicago how exciting the things are happening in Hong Kong.
We'd love to have you, and we hope that we can have a nonstop from Hong Kong to Chicago again in the very near future. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for everybody that joined online. Thank you so much.